Hey everybody, it is Thomas from Duo Reviews, and I am going to be recording my first ever video game review on this channel. This review will be of Spyro the Dragon on the PS1. Spyro the Dragon has a long history and ties to the Crash Bandicoot series and just all sorts of this long history, and I don't want to go into detail of all that. The basics are: the four best-selling PlayStation games, from what I remember, were Metal Gear Solid, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy VII, and there was one other, and Resident Evil. And they realized those games are all either T or M rated, and we want like a kid-friendly game that kids will love. They looked over at Nintendo 64 and saw Mario 64 and looked at other just popular games. And there are a lot of platformers: Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, just more. Those are just two, to name a few. And so they realized we need our own platformer. Now, they had a platform. They had Crash Bandicoot, which, surprisingly, I don't actually have in my little line of PlayStation games. I have the first three Crash games, but they're all elsewhere in my house. One of them's over there, one of them's over in the living room, the other one's over there. But the thing with Crash is, and I love Crash. I'm telling you now, I have the first four Crash games and Crash of the Titans. Some Crash games are better than others, but I love Crash. But the thing was, the Crash games are very linear. They're very point A to point B. Okay, imagine, if you haven't played them or don't know anything about it, imagine walking through a hallway but with platforms to jump over enemies. That's what it is. It's that linear. So, they wanted a big, massive, they wanted Super Mario 64 on the PlayStation pretty much. Super Mario 64 has massive levels with multiple objectives, and it has is massive. The levels for the time were huge, and there's so much to find, and there's all sorts of secrets and all sorts of stuff you can find. So they wanted that. That's why if you read the back of the case, it says, "Meet Spyro the Dragon. He's a feisty little flame-spouting dragon on a gigantic go-anywhere 3D fantasy adventure." What it's trying to say is, like I said, go-anywhere adventure. Gigantic go-anywhere adventure. It's trying to say that the levels are big, they're 3D, they're open-ended, you can do whatever, you can go wherever, and there's lots to explore. That's kind of, by that you can kind of tell they wanted to recreate Super Mario 64's, they wanted to recreate that. The thing is, they didn't. Super Mario 64 is very open-ended. If you play it, there's multiple objectives you can get, and there's all sorts of stuff to find. Now, Crash Bandicoot, on the other hand, is probably the most linear 3D platformer ever. Go from point A to point B, walking pretty much straight in a line. This is in between. I'll say this game is in between. This game isn't quite as linear as Crash, where you only go point A to point B, but it isn't quite as open as Super Mario 64. The levels are fairly linear, but unlike Crash, there are paths you can go. So it's like a mixture. Imagine Super Mario 64 meets Crash. They had a baby. Now, on for more of the gameplay. I've already explained the basics, but essentially, okay, in a Crash Bandicoot, or at least the first one, you go straight forward, you get to the end of the level. So Mario 64, you get stars, which you need to get by doing objectives. This is sort of weird. In this, you go, like a rather linear level, but there's all sorts of like little extra areas you can go to. Now, instead of, you don't even have to get to the end of the level, or you don't have to collect some kind of major collectible. Instead, you have to collect dragons, which are frozen by an evil villain named Nasty Nork, and you have to get gems. These are so you can unlock the next world. To get to the next world, you have to have either a certain amount of dragons or a certain amount of gems. There are boss battles, but you don't even need to fight them to get to the next world. They do house A, bosses, albeit really easy ones. B, they house more gems, all sorts of gems, and C, dragons. So if you're kind of having a hard time finding gems or dragons, which if you're over the age of 10, you probably won't, but if you do, you can always go to those levels and find the stuff there and defeat the boss, which will give you some more gems if I remember correctly. Now, this sounds fine and dandy, but there's two problems. One, you don't even have to get to the end of the level. Literally, you can collect all the stuff in the level and not even get to the end. Just quit the level, and it'll save all your stuff. You don't even have to get to the end of the level, making beating the levels pretty pointless, which is really annoying. Another thing that really bugged me. This is a story. In World 2, and this actually happened to me, in World 2, I collected a lot of stuff. So when I got to World 3, I could literally skip World 3 and go to World 4 because I already collected everything I needed to collect in World 3 for World 3 already in World 2. I didn't skip World 3 because I wanted to see what it was like, but I could have easily if I wanted to, which is the problem. You could skip entire worlds. You don't need, none of the levels are actually technically required. You just, all you need to do is get the stuff out of them, and that really isn't that bad. Well, it would be. Super Mario 64, well, in that, like, the stuff you need is the stars that are in the levels. And if you get enough stars, let's say in the first level, the Bomb Battlefield, I believe it's called, you get all of the stars. That means there are some of the levels you don't even have to do. You can maybe do a few stars from one level and then go to the first boss. And that means you don't have to do all the levels, just the ones you want to do and the stars you want to get. In this game, it's like that. But in that Super Mario 64, if you did the minimal amount you had to do, and you 100% of this game, you would still spend more time in Super Mario 64 than you would in this game. This game is very short, and it suffers because of that. Now, I feel like I've been dissing this game, but it's not a bad game, not at all. The music is phenomenal. Stuart Copeland is the composer, and he's the former drummer for the British rock band The Police. One of the songs in the series, I believe it was one of the songs from this game, maybe it was Spyro 3, I don't remember, was actually featured on his anthology collection CD of all his best songs. That's how good the music in these games are. So that's pretty impressive. Now, it's not exactly like memorable to where I'm going to be walking around town just kind of humming it, but when you hear it, you're like, that's from Spyro, because it just fits Spyro so well. Another thing that fits Spyro so well is the graphics. They're so colorful, they're so bright, they're so just good to look at. And it really makes you feel like it's like half medieval looking, half cartoon looking, and it takes place in the world of dragons, so it really fits all of that. And that works really, really well. So the graphics are good, the music is good. Also the platforming, even though like I said, the levels, you don't have to do all of them, and some of the worlds are literally pretty much optional if you got enough stuff in the previous world. But the levels are very well designed. There isn't as much emphasis on platforming as there is collecting, but that doesn't mean there isn't platforming. There is a lot. You pretty much get to the end of the level, and there is platforming, but there's also a major emphasis on beating enemies, which is also sort of carried on to Ratchet and Clank, which is Insomniac's next baby. Pretty much with this game, some enemies will like moon you, or some will like try to like run at you and like get all scared and then run away, and fighting enemies is like a bigger focus. Take Crash, for example. Enemies just walk back and forth, and they won't actually try to target after you and chase after you, which was kind of changed in Jak and Daxter. I guess Naughty Dog kind of learned from Insomniac, because fun fact, when they made these games, they were literally in the exact same building. Spyro and Crash, some of the Spyro and Crash games were actually just made like in the same room, and you can tell both the games have lots of charm, and this game was actually made during the development of Spyro of Crash 3, so there was actually a secret code in the instruction manual for a Crash 3 demo, which is really cool. So even if you hate the game, when you have Crash 3 demo, that's cool. Unless you have Crash 3, then there's no point in putting the game in. But again, the levels are really great. There's all sorts of platforming. It's very, very fun. So everything's really great about this game, except for the two major flaws: the structure, just off, and the length. Let's just say I got it on a Saturday night and beat it on Monday afternoon. I spent 4.5 hours in this game. I didn't 100% it, but still, just to beat the game, 4.5 hours. That should not be that way. 4.5 hours is too short, especially for a game this fun. See, I want to give this game an A- or a B+, maybe even higher, but I can't because there's just so many flaws. There's the structure and there's the length. Those are really the only two big flaws, besides just extremely easy boss battles, which are really the only one that gave me even a little bit of trouble was the last boss. But because of the very easy and quite frankly not that creative boss battles, because of the 4.5 hour game pretty much, and because of the structure being a mess and just having some level not be required and just all sorts of just a mess, I will have to give Spyro the Dragon, what is considered a PlayStation classic, a B-. Now I've heard Spyro 2 and 3 are much better than this first game. I did own Spyro 3, and I think I traded it years ago, which I wish I didn't, but I did own it. And I have never owned Spyro 2 or never played it, but I hear those games are a lot better than this one, so I will check out those games and I definitely will review them. And hopefully they're better than this. I do remember Spyro 3 being a lot longer than this game, so that's definitely a plus. Because that's really the only major gripe. And I do remember the bosses being a lot harder, and the structure not being such a... And the structure still wasn't that great, but it felt like more like Super Mario 64 with the level, with the, how it was long, so it didn't matter. But this game gets a B- on my scale, and hopefully the other games get higher. So if you like what you saw here, comment, like, subscribe, and definitely share the video on whatever social media you use, and that will help us tremendously. And thanks so much for watching. This has been a video by Do Reviews, Thomas Garrett. I will see you later.